Hey all, welcome back to another math video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a different kind of form. So far we've talked about slope-intercept form and we've talked about point-slope form, and today we're finally going to introduce standard form. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at it. Here we have the standard form, which in algebra it's written as ax plus by equals c, where a, b, and c are integers, meaning they're numbers. Whole numbers, fractions, as long as they have a value, they're there. A and b are not allowed to both be 0. One of them can be 0, but they both cannot be 0. If they're both 0, then we don't really have an equation. So to show you an example of one with numbers already plugged in, underneath it we have 2x minus 3y equals -3. And for this example, just to help you sort of get used to how we plug in values, a would be 2, b would be 3, or actually -3 in this case, and c is also -3. Okay, and this is what the equation looks like with values actually plugged into it. Go ahead and erase it so that you can see it again. So again, this is an example with number values plugged in, and there are a few benefits to this actually. So let's go ahead and talk about why we would use standard form in the first place. So the standard form equation is useful. A lot of times we use it to find the x and y intercepts easily. So in case you've forgotten, those are the points in which our line, which in my example it's here in red. X and y intercepts are the points where the line crosses the x-axis, that's our x-intercept, and the y-axis, that's our y-intercept. So sometimes it's nice to be able to find these values in certain real-life problems. These two numbers tend to be important, okay, these two values. So sometimes it's nice to be able to find them quickly, so we use standard form. The other reason why they're helpful is when we want to write the equation to either a horizontal or a vertical line. So if I have a line that looks like this, standard form usually is the best way to write it, or if I have a line like this in the blue, a vertical line. Standard form is usually the easiest way to write an equation like this. What we're going to be doing today essentially is we're going to practice using standard form in order to help us find the x and the y intercepts. So in order to do this, we simply just need to set y equal to 0 when we're trying to solve for the x-intercept. And we need to set x equal to 0 when we're trying to solve for the y-intercept. Okay, so we're going to look at certain equations and we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to solve them. So here I have my first equation, which is 2x plus 5y equals 10. And again, the instructions say identify the x and y intercepts of the graph of each equation. So for our first one, I usually like to go in alphabetical order and find the x-intercept before the y-intercept. You don't have to be that way. You can do either way. But essentially what we do when we're trying to solve for the x, we make the y value 0. When we're trying to solve for the y-intercept, we make the x value 0. So let's go ahead and start off with the x. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in, so let's do the x-intercept. And I'm going to plug in 0 for the y. So now I have no y value, I just have 0. And what that ends up doing is 5 times 0 is just 0. So I get 2x plus 0 equals 10. Which, in all honesty, you don't need to write this 0. I'll leave it there so that you don't get lost in case you do. But really what I have is 2x equals 10. Now, it's not like I just plug in 0 and then the work's done. The other step I have to do is actually just usually division. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But here in this case, I have 2 equals 10. When I divide this out and solve for x, whatever I get for x is actually my x-intercept. So I can divide by 2 on both sides, and I end up getting x equals 5. Which means if I wanted to graph this equation, I would see that the line is going to cross the x-axis at 5, the number 5 on the x-axis. If I wanted to write this as a point, I would write 5, 0. Why 0? Because the y was 0. Okay, on the x-axis, every point on there has a y value of 0. Okay, so that's how we find the x-intercept. Now let's go ahead and do the same for the y. Here's my y-intercept. Okay, so I have, for the y-intercept, we sort of do the opposite, and instead of plugging in a 0 for the y, we're going to plug in a 0 for the x. So I'm going to have 2 times 0 plus 5y equals 10. Okay, so 2 times 0 is just 0 plus 5y equals 10. Again, I don't necessarily need that 0 there. Really, all I have is 5y equals 10. And just like the last problem, once I get to this step, sometimes I have to divide, sometimes I don't, but typically that's the next step, divide. So I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides to get y by itself. And here I find that y equals 2. So that means my y-intercept would be crossed at 2, or at 0, 2. Now, since we plugged in 0 for the x value, when I write my coordinate point, it's 0 first, 2. And this is how we use standard form to help us find our x and our y intercepts. Let's go ahead and let's do this one more time with a different problem. So here I have 2x minus y equals 8. So again, for this one, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the x-intercept first. How do I find my x-intercept? Well, to find our x-intercept, that just means plug in 0 for y. So we got 2x minus, again, instead of y, I'm going to plug in 0. And I get equals 8. So now, I can simply just simplify this. That would just be 2x equals 8. I can then divide by 2 on both sides. And I get x equals 4. Meaning my x-intercept is actually at 4, 0. Okay? And again, we're going to repeat these steps for the y-intercept. Now I'm going to plug in 0 for my x value. So now I'll have 2 times 0 instead of 2x. Minus y equals 8. And this time, when I plug in 0 for x, I'm left with 0 minus y equals 8, which I don't really need the 0, so I'm going to erase it. And I'm left with negative y equals 8. So, in this case, it is important to get rid of the negative sign. But how do we do that? Well, you can't add anything. What you need to do is, like I said in the previous problems, you need to divide. But what do I divide by to get rid of a negative? Well, hopefully you can remember that in front of y, technically there is a 1. So we're going to divide by negative 1 on both sides. Remember that if there's no number in front of a variable, 1 is always there. Because you have one of those variables. You have 1y. So technically there is a 1 there, which means I can divide by negative 1. That'll cancel out these negatives and actually give me my y by itself, which is what I want. And 8 divided by negative 1 is nothing other than negative 8. And that's how I solve for my y-intercept on this problem. So for this one, I would have 0, negative 8 be my y-intercept. So hopefully this video has helped you understand why we use standard form, why it's handy, and hopefully now you can use it yourself to find x and y-intercepts. Now in these up and coming videos, you're going to see that we're going to use this form a little bit more, and we're going to talk about how we can graph it and how we can tell which graph matches to which form. So stay tuned for those. And as always, I just want to thank you for watching, and I hope that you really do continue to learn from these videos. I'll see you guys next time.